Right, let's get to it. The cartoon I'm going to draw is one that I originally came up with. At least I thought of the seed of the idea years ago. Years and years ago, I was on a train. I was on the Amtrak train going from Oregon to Sarasota, Florida. And it was 1989. I was headed down to my very first Cartoonist convention. At that time, it was called the Joan Brown Cartoon Classic. And Joan Brown was the wife of Dick Brown, who did Hagar the Horrible. Anyway, I was on my way down there to attend this, and it was a charity event. His wife had passed away from emphysema, I believe, and in her honor, Dick Brown started the Joan Brown Cartoonist Classic. The story I'm going to tell is about before I got to the Cartoonist Classic in Sarasota. I was taking the Amtrak train, and on this trip, I met a whole lot of people, fun group of people. One of the gentlemen in this fun group of people was a guy who told me his name was, well, I'm not going to say his full name just in case, and you'll know why once I get towards the end of this story. But we'll call him Steve. I always had a video camera with me when I was at this age. Always had a video camera. One thing, this Steve character, who is a little older than me, is probably in his mid-20s, early 30s. He said to me, he goes, "Don't film me. If you do, I'll kill you." And of course, I thought he was kidding. And so the rest of the group, we all just kind of chuckled away. But I thought, you know what? I'm not going to film him, just in case. Well, we got all the way to the East Coast on the train. We were in Virginia. And it was about 3 in the morning. And I was in the dining car, one of the dining cars. And this Steve fellow was sitting across from me in the booth. And we were just visiting, and he, according to him, he was a science fiction writer from Ventura, California, and he was going somewhere in Virginia, I can't remember where, but he was going somewhere in Virginia to his sister's wedding. That was the story I got. So I'm sitting there, and he's sitting there, and we're just visiting, drinking coffee. Yeah, feed it, get out. So long that lasts. Didn't last long at all. Stop it, guys. Behave. We stopped in Richmond, Virginia. We were just sitting there waiting. It seemed like we were waiting a long time. It was the train had stopped for quite a while. I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, 2 guys get on the train, and they come walking into the dining car, and they're both wearing jean jackets, blue jeans. They're just like brand new blue jean outfits, really clean cut, short haircuts. And I said to Steve, "Steve, something's going on. Something's going on. These guys are cops. These guys, something's going to happen." And I'm all like thinking something's going to happen. I was right, but I was thinking it was going to happen to somebody else. I wasn't thinking it was going to involve me at all. And Steve's like, "No, man, don't say it. You're making me nervous. You're making me nervous." I said, "No, something's going down." You know, I'm looking around, waiting for something's going to happen. We were stopped way too long. These guys were not on the train before. They look totally out of place. And then they stand up and they walk over to our table and they pull their jean jackets back and they each have a gun. And they have their hand resting on the butt of their guns. And they told us to get our hands out on the table where they can see them. And of course, I'm like, what? What's going on here? Once they did that, they handcuffed us, and about 5 or 6 other uniformed police officers got on the train. And they escorted us off the train. We had to walk through all the passenger cars. Most of the people were sleeping. Of course, they were waking up at this point with all these cops coming aboard and everything. And they watched Steve and I being led off the train into out onto the boardwalk of the train station. And they took Steve off in one direction and put him into a building. Meanwhile, I'm standing there and I'm surrounded by 11 cops. And I know there was 11 cops because I counted them. And I counted them and I said it probably wasn't, I shouldn't have been so cocky, but I said, "Okay, hang on for a minute. Goats!" Now they're fighting around the camera. Okay, yeah. All right, now it's just no goats and a cartoonist. So I counted the police officers and I said 11 cops. I said, "Don't you think it's a bit of an overkill?" I'm surrounded by all these cops sitting out on the platform, and they had taken Steve into another building there. And then they took me into a separate building, sat me down, and started asking me all these questions. They wanted to know how I knew this guy, how long I knew him, what he told me. Of course, I'm like, all I know is he told me his name, Steve Blank. He was a science fiction writer from Ventura, California, and he was heading to his sister's wedding somewhere in Virginia. They never asked me my name. They never asked for my ID. They didn't ask anything about me. They didn't ask me to prove anything about who I was. They were purely focused on him. And after I told them what I could, and obviously it wasn't much, they decided, okay, well, we don't need you anymore. You can go back on the train. The train is still sitting there. Well, this time the conductor of the train, the main guy in charge, gets off the train, comes over, talks to the cops for a little bit. He didn't know what was going on, but he figured I was trouble, didn't want me back on the train. And I'm thinking, oh great, I'm stuck here in Richmond, Virginia. I don't know anybody except for Steve. And there's no way I'm gonna just sit here. I need to get back on that train. And luckily, one of the other people I had befriended on the train was one of the train stewards, and his name was Plato. I remember that, Plato. And I had gotten to know him over the days going through, up until this point. And he told the conductor, he said, hey, I'll vouch for Chad. He can go on the train. I'll keep an eye on him. You don't have to worry about him, blah, blah, blah. And the conductor reluctantly said, okay, all right, fine, whatever. But he told me you have to ride into the very last passenger section, which there was nobody back there. At this point, I'm like, okay, whatever, just get me back on the train. And as I'm walking on the train, I have to go through all the other passenger cars, and all the people are looking at me because they just seen me handcuffed and stormed out of this place. And here I am getting back on the train. I went and sat in the back car all by myself, and the train got going. And as soon as it got going, I returned to my old seat back up there with everybody else because I wasn't going to ride in the back there. I had a little bit of a little trouble for certain authority figures at that moment, and that moment was the train conductor. I was just a little ticked at him for thinking that I would be somebody that he can't trust. Of course, it wasn't his fault. No, looking back on it, I know, he didn't know who I was, but I knew who I was, and I thought I was probably pretty safe. Thought so anyway. The rest of the trip, uneventful. Got to Sarasota, went to the Joan Brown Cartoonist Classic, met a lot of my cartoonist heroes for the first time, Jim Davis, Johnny Hart, Mike Peters, and had a great time, but up until that point, I didn't think I was going to make it. I thought that might have been it for me. All right, and to this day, I still don't know who Steve was. I don't know why they arrested him. I don't know what the deal was. If anybody's watching this and they know, Steve, Ventura, California, going to his sister's wedding in Virginia. Steve, if you're watching, I'm in the witness protection program, so don't even try to look for me. But if anybody has any details of what the heck was going on, give me a hint. Give me a hint, because to this day, it still bothers me. I'm very curious to know what was going on there. All right, well, there we go. Another fine comedy masterpiece. Once we slap some color on it, throw the punchline on, and boom. There you have it. All right, on behalf of Cheese, right there, yep, and Crackers, who's down here, thank you for joining us, and let's do this again sometime here in the Goat Barn with two goats and a cartoonist. We'll see you next time.